Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
All right, well, thank you for joining. We're going to do kind of a flyover introduction here where I'm going to share just some kind of highlights on new technologies and observations and just kind of ideas of what's going on in mobile gaming in today's world. And then we're going to invite up some panelists to have an interactive discussion around the same general idea. And, you know, should be an interesting conversation. So the title of this is, you know, thinking outside the rectangle and emerging technologies in gaming. And what I've noticed, and I hope all of you have noticed as well, is that we're really, I feel like, on the cusp of this new era in mobile gaming where we've had a lot of kind of standard technologies that have been in the space that have done a great job getting us to where we are today. And we're seeing an evolution of many of these technologies with new kind of progressive tech or pipelines or business intelligence tools or whatnot that are now showing up to solve problems that have emerged that didn't exist when we looked at the industry, say, 5 years ago. And so just as a sort of a general concept, not that this is possible, but thinking about where we're heading, thinking about VR and AR and emerging technologies and platforms, I like to just sort of throw up these slides to get people thinking, what would it be like? What if we could do these things? How would Clash of Clans be designed if you could actually smell your phone, if we had smell technology in place? And I'm not suggesting that we do or we will. But just as a concept, where are we heading with technology as it relates to game design and the business of gaming? So really quickly about me, my name is Nick. I'm the head of gaming at Immersion. Before Immersion, I ran a company called Somatone, which has been in the game space for about 11 years. So I've been in this industry for quite a while. Immersion is a IP licensing company. Historically, we now are bringing content support to gaming. We have strong IP portfolio in haptic technology. So for those of you who don't know, haptics is the use of vibration and tactile effects to create kind of meaningful and engaging experiences. Most people know us as the creators of Rumble for PlayStation and Xbox and DualShock, force feedback and steering wheels and joysticks and whatnot. And we're taking all of that learning and all of that technology and we're bringing that to the mobile gaming space to help advance what is possible in mobile gaming. This kind of just gives you an overview of the areas that we work. But again, we are really excited about how haptics as a layer of the experience can be added into the mobile gaming environment. And so we know that stimulating the senses is a great way to help create engagement. Audio is a really good example of this. Music communicates emotional qualities to the game. Sound design allows you to communicate interaction and events within the game. Voiceover is a very human element to games. And so if you look at where audio was and always has been, what would it be like if you could really truly immerse your players in a game audio soundtrack? And I bring this up because of one of the new technologies that I just want to mention, which is what Dolby is doing with audio, which is this amazing new SDK that they've introduced that allows you to take advantage of their encoding tech to change the way that we currently experience audio in mobile games from a very kind of flat, low quality experience, assuming you don't have headphones on, of course, and advance that into something that's much more immersive. So with this tech, this is a free technology, it's very simple and easy to integrate. You can change that very flat, kind of low fidelity experience into something that's really truly amazing. And if you A/B a game with and without this Dolby API, you can really hear it's night and day in terms of how we are advancing the experience of mobile gaming through technology. Another example, and we've got the head of sales from Priori Data here, is data collection and business intelligence. I really like what Priori Data is doing because this is a totally different model on on how we gather data in the industry. It's kind of a crowdsourced model. If you work with them and you contribute your information, they share everything back with you. And one of the statements that Anders has made that I think is really true is that most games fail to succeed, or many games fail to succeed, because they don't have the business intelligence that they need to make the right decisions. They don't have the data and the BI that really helps make these critical decisions to be successful. And what Priori data is doing is really, in my opinion, kind of a game changer with how they are making this democratized ability to gather data within the industry to help developers make decisions. Another one is deltaDNA, and I've known Mark for a long time and always been a fan of what they're doing with analytics. This is not just A/B testing, this is not just retention graphs and so forth. What deltaDNA is doing that's really quite unique is its personalization and its segmentation. So I think we've all thought, what would it be like if we can just, take our one game and really tune that experience for all of the different players, whether they're competitive players or novices, whether they're hardcore, not just demographics, but actual behaviors. And now let's tune our experience to optimize our game for the behaviors of all of the people who are playing. This is sort of we look at analytics as a sort of blanket term, but what we're doing, or what Mark's doing with this technology, is really getting into the weeds of what do individual player cohorts want, and how do we optimize our game to speak directly to those players to improve retention and monetization and performance. And I just think that's a really exciting way to advance technology. And then we've got immersion and what we're doing with haptic effects. And so, we can't taste, and we probably never should taste our phones. You can't smell them, but you can feel them. And this is something that is coming to market. It's in market now. It's emerging and becoming more and more popular as a way to use technology to improve and enhance the experience of playing games. For those of you interested, there's actually a category on the Google Play Store for games you can feel. Angry Birds is one of our clients, along with a host of others, and you should go and play these games with haptic effects, because the experience is unlike anything you've experienced before. It's an enhancement and an improvement and an advancement in what we're doing with games. We believe really strongly in the value of touch. It's a kind of a core way we experience the world. We've always looked at gaming as audio and visual, and audio maybe 50% and visual 50%. And we're in this new paradigm now where we have touch as a core part of the experience that can now be brought to players. And so we look at that as one of the sort of myriad of technologies that are out there in the space today, helping to make games more exciting, more immersive, helping to tune and advance the experience. So that's kind of the flyover. I just wanted to sort of set the stage with this overview. And now I'd love to have the panelists come up and just kind of introduce everybody. So I'm just going to introduce each of you, and if you guys can just share briefly about your background and just introduce yourselves, that would be great.
So my name is David. As Nick was saying, we're really interested in how to use the data within the game to build engagement. Maybe talk a little bit as we go through the panel about how we do that. But starting point for us is that not enough games are making money right now, and how can we use technology to improve the experience, get people playing longer, deeper into the game, to make more games profitable.
Hi, my name is Ravi Belwal. I head the games business development for Samsung. So what we are doing is we are building a curated game store for Android apps. As you know, discoverability is the key for any app. It's very tough for a game publisher to be like a Flappy Bird. So what we are trying to change is build a boutique store with very limited number of content items, including apps and games. So that is what we'll be talking about during the panel discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keith Pichelman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Concrete Software. We are a mobile games developer and publisher that's been around for 12 years. I know a lot of people tend to think that mobile business has been around since the probably beginning of the iPhone. Back in the day, we were developing and publishing games for the old J2Me devices, the Razr phones, the old brick Nokia phones, and have made mini turns and made it through the storm. And today, build games for both Android and iOS. We have our own brand, which is our Aces brand. You'll see a lot of games like Aces Spades, Aces Cribbage, and such. Then we also work with a lot of big brands, like the PBA for PBA Bowling Challenge game. We have a game that came out earlier this year with NHL, which is NHL Hockey Target Smash. And then later this year and beginning next year, we'll have 2 more brands and 2 more big games coming out. So we're excited about that.
My name is Anders, and I run sales and developer relations for Priori. So what we do is, we're in the business intelligence side, something that most game developers think is incredibly sexy. And what we do is, by providing download and revenue estimates for every game and every app in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store and the different markets, we try to help developers size markets, monitor competition, and really try to base their decisions on data rather than gut feeling, which unfortunately is the case on a lot of incidents.
Great, thank you. Can you guys, is this working? No, maybe, yeah, okay. Sorry, stick it in my mouth. So what I love about this panel is we really have kind of all parts of the industry represented. If you're looking at this, we've got business intelligence, we've got a dyed-in-the-wool game developer, distribution through Samsung, data analytics, and Rovio sort of represents the whole package, publishing, development, and technology, as we'll kind of get into later. So I wanted to start with just some targeted questions for you guys. Keith, maybe we could start with you. I think one of the questions I'm interested in is this concept of SDK fatigue, and that there are so many choices available to developers. You can walk out the door and walk out there and just be bombarded with options. What is your take as a developer on this SDK fatigue notion? How do you determine which SDKs are important? What's too much? Can you share some perspective on the SDK fatigue topic?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because look at the conference where we're at, right? You walk down the hallways here, and it's half the companies have SDKs. They're trying to get us put it in our games. We've been around for a long time. I think we've definitely run into SDK fatigue in the past. It's probably most important to think about how much time it's going to be to put in the SDK to try it out, and just as important to remember how much time it's going to be to upkeep, to update it in the future. At one point in time, we probably had about 20 SDKs in our games, and half of them were probably ad services. And that, and I think with, especially not to pick on ad services, but ad services had updates every quarter. 10 advertised, that was 40 updates plus our regular SDKs. You can easily get into the situation where you're not building out what you need to from data for your customers, and just keeping up SDKs. Thinking about what to put in, like how we decide to put SDKs in, it's we don't have an exact science, though we look at how much work it's going to be, how much upkeep. Is it something that's going to that in the future are we going to need to work with it, have somebody running it all the time, maybe have lots of updates, and then we try to figure out what it's going to do for our customers, for our revenue, or whatever it may be. If I think about like exact examples, I look at, I'll use Adobe, for example, since you brought that up before. We integrate Adobe into our games, and looking at that, it was very simple to integrate. We don't think we're going to need a lot of updates. We didn't know exactly how that was going to affect our end users. We just assumed it was good. But on the other side, what really made it compelling was the Adobe team. So part of the reason that we integrated Adobe was that Adobe features our game at different shows like this. you know, and now we get some free marketing as well. So right there, that sort of brought it to where we're kind of like, oh, that makes it ROI positive right there. Now, hopefully, it's even better for our users as well, and it makes a better product in the long run.
But what's the hit rate? I'm interested in the hit rate. Where you got 20 SDKs. How many did you get value out of, and how many would you not do again? Because that's where the fatigue comes from, isn't it? When you spend the effort, but you don't get the return on that investment of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, if I think back, not again to pick on ad networks, but that's probably the one that just relates closest to. 10 was too many for us, and we're really excited. We built our own mediation tool, so obviously to run all the 10. I would say in the next probably 6 months to 12 months, we'll probably move over to somebody else, let someone else handle that. With the 10, now we are down to, with our own service, down to 4. So 4 has been manageable for us. It's been a point where we feel really, you know, that we have everything we want, from our video ads to interstitial ads, to incentivized, non-incentivized. So we feel pretty good about that. Though that being said, I'm looking forward to, at some point in the future here, we'll work with another partner, hopefully, that has one SDK that we can, you know, use all the networks we want at one time.
Yeah, and Anders, I know you've done some research on this topic. Do you recall the data we were talking at one point about what's the average? You know, I think for maybe indie developers or people who are entering the space, you know, it can be overwhelming, and they need to understand what's common, what's an industry practice, how much is too much. Do you recall the average numbers you came across?
Yeah, so on an Android, the average Android, the average Android app, there's 9 SDKs integrated for non-games and 11 on average for games. I don't know how like which percentage of those are ad networks, but I know that they almost all have Google Analytics integrated. So I mean that takes away 1 at least, but it's a it's a phenomenally high number. And I also know when there seems to be people, a lot of app developers seem to be completely like ignoring they do tend to integrate just about any SDK and then hope that it goes well, and then there's like the update process and so on and so forth. There seems to be, like, let's say 1 or 2 too many.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from you, David, on this too, because, you know, for Keith, it makes sense. You add, you know, Dolby into your game as an independent, you know, kind of self-run studio. You look for those user acquisition opportunities and marketing opportunities. When you're Rovio, you don't necessarily need to jump at an opportunity to get featured at a trade show because you're Rovio. And so what's the more publisher perspective on SDK fatigue, and, you know, which are the right ones, and how do you evaluate these decisions?
I would say first and foremost, if we're going to add an SDK at Rovio, and this applies to a couple different places I've worked at too, it has to benefit the end user. If it's something that's going to make the game either run faster or improve the gameplay experience, that's where you start. But if, you know, I've sat many times in meetings with people, and the first thing out of their mouth is, oh, we have an easy SDK to use. And basically, if you tell me that, I know you're lying, because nothing is easy to put in. Nothing. We all know mobile's complex, right? So if you tell me that, I'm just going to probably get up and walk out of the room.
I say that all the time.
Yeah, well, and you should learn, because it's not the way to do it. But essentially, every time you're going to put in an SDK, we evaluate it on terms of cost, right? How much time is it going to take for us to put it in? Secondly, what are we not doing if we're putting that in, because that's a takeaway from something else we should be doing. And last but not least, what's the direct benefit for the user? And, you know, like you said, with so many SDKs, you know, loading up in a game, that takes away from startup time, right? And one of the goals I think we've always tried to achieve at Rovio is that we want a game to start up quickly. It's got to be very quick and get in the game as fast as you can. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't, but the end result should be you're not waiting for SDKs to load, you're getting into the game. And I know a lot of SDKs don't give you that choice of when to load it. And that's the frustrating point for us, is we'd rather know when we can signal that SDK and turn it on, and some companies don't allow that. So,
yeah, I mean, for me, this is a really interesting topic, because part of what we're talking about today are progressive SDKs, right? So these are people with new features, new technologies that may not be proven. So this whole ROI notion, which is certainly, I think, what every experienced developer kind of considers when weighing your options, isn't always quantifiable when we're talking about something new. And, you know, haptics is a very good example of that. trying to evaluate the value of haptics or Dolby's API or some of the new technologies that exist. And for me, that's just personally interesting.
I believe this is a problem as well because in terms of analytics and personalization, the richer data that feeds into the platform, the more precise you can be about the experience. So I think developer communities need to realize that it does need attention, time to put in an SDK properly, but that will pay you back many times over in terms of your access to the data, the player understanding. And so, yeah, I completely agree with David. SDKs are troublesome, difficult, time-consuming, but they do need to have some care and attention in them because then you're building on a solid foundation. The worst thing that you can do is rush it, do it half-heartedly, do it in a list of other priorities, because then everybody gets disappointed, and that's where the fatigue comes from, I think.
That's right, because you don't actually realize the full benefits. You're doing all this work, and then you've moved on before you do the work to actually benefit from the value that you've invested in.
Exactly. So our SDK actually happens to be a smallish number of events, but highly parameterized, so that we can snapshot players as we go through the game. But out of that, we can tell competency and momentum and levels of aggression or social behaviors. A whole vast, world of revelations then is unlocked because of that data.
Right.
So that's where the benefit kicks in.
I mean, there's almost a learning curve too, right? You've got to teach your users how to take that information and actually apply it in a way that's going to bring value. So, Ravi, I'd actually like to move over to you. Another topic that I'm really interested in is this discoverability sort of issue that's out there. I heard just an hour ago that there's 1.5 million apps on Google Play. Someone told me that I think it's close to 15,000 games were launched last month. So that has obvious ramifications for how can there possibly be visibility around that much content that's coming into the market and competing for users. And so, Ravi, I'd love to hear your thoughts on discoverability, what you're doing with Samsung, and then even beyond. Are there technologies out there that can help with this discoverability issue on Samsung, but also with Google and Apple?
Sure. I think discoverability is the key to success these days. Not many games can be like, as I said, Flappy Birds or Crossy Roads in a day or two. So there are, what we are doing is at Samsung, we are curating our store. We are reducing the content item to 4,000 plus. We are making our store invitation only. We are making it as a boutique store with very, very strategic partners. And we want you guys to succeed. So we want to create a store where there is the content is very limited and it's easily discoverable by the customers. So that is our key focus. To do that, we are also working with key partners like Pocket Gamer, IGN, GamesBeat, and we are going to industry events to evangelize more about this. If you are interested in coming on board, we will be able to make sure that your games or apps are discoverable inside the Samsung Galaxy App Store. We will be able to give you a feature banner slot, a featured promotion, a spotlight promotion for a couple of weeks. And that may help you with more download numbers and may also help you with more ROI generation. So yeah, I think we are the main reason for us to do this is to address the discoverability issue and to make sure that the games which are hidden inside the other stores, which are doing really good and are not coming on top, may be discovered through our store.
So if we're looking at 15,000 apps last month alone, and you're looking at a 4,000 app community, how do you determine which ones should be included? Is it based on the size of the IP and industry sort of power, or is it just kind of a gut level reaction? Is this game fun or not fun? And then are there technologies that are at play here that are making games more competitive for you to be included versus what is already known and on the top 200 grossing charts of the Google Play Store?
Yeah, great question. So how we are finding them is, first of all, we are working with indie game developers. So we look at those games carefully, and then we also go to events like Casual Connect and also all industry events. We are judging these indie games, and then we talk to indie partners to see how their games are, how the new games they are coming up, what the title is, and what is their focus, which markets they are going to. So that is one criteria. Second criteria is definitely for the strategic partners. We are looking at download numbers. We are looking at star ratings on how they are performing on other stores before we want to bring them inside our store. That is another criteria that we look at. Then we also look at stores like App Annie, Pocket Gamers, the review that has been done by the independent reviewers, how the review has been done, what is the star rating that has been given by Pocket Gamer or by GameSpeed guys or by IGN or by how they're performing using looking at the App Annie analytics tool. So these are some of the tools and the criteria that we look at before we determine which game we can bring inside our store and how we can promote it.
If I could add to that quick, I'd say just make Angry Birds 2. Like that, I think we do something that's pretty unique. It's a little outside maybe the topic with it, but I mean, besides, we do work with Adobe and say Immersion. I think that helps us quite a bit for discoverability. Doing some other things outside where now we can work with you, and you guys actually Immersion's helping us go to Google and get featured that way as well, which is another way of being discovered. We work really closely with the PBA that I mentioned before, and I think working with brands like that has been absolutely fantastic for discoverability for at least our size company too. The PBA has all kinds of points of on their website. They go to shows. We have commercials on ESPN now through them. Lots of points of discoverability by working with that brand. So if you've kind of like seen where we've been going at Concrete Software, our next game was NHL branded. We're doing the same thing with them. Our next 2 games will be very much the same way. We're finding that as being a great way to kind of thinking outside the box, I think. Trying to work those brand partners and get them to have more points. And actually, the PBA, that's a really interesting one too, where we're actually now working with the brand partners that work with the PBA. And so you'll see like Ebonite, DV8, Brunswick, and all these different bowling companies are actually promoting the game as well. While we put the real bowling balls and such in merchandise into the games. So.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I think Concrete, in many ways, to me, is sort of a real sort of case study or textbook developer to look at in terms of your model, because you've been very successful independently by taking advantage of these different kind of opportunities to create discoverability for yourself, and that not all new indie developers have those same relationships, but the way that you really kind of exploit all these different channels, I think is a great way to help, you and just independent developers that are out there looking for more opportunities to get seen and noticed. I mean, it seems to have worked very well for you, so.
Yeah, absolutely, it's worked really well.
Great. So Anders, I wanted to just hear from you on kind of this concept of business intelligence, and when you're talking to people, how are developers you're speaking to assessing the kind of the ROI of integrating your technology into their platform? How do you quantify that for them?
Yeah, so we are fortunately not integrating via SDK. We're integrating via an email that is added to an app store and that facilitates a data exchange. It doesn't change the fact that I think this is an interesting point. Like we are absolutely not in the same industry as such. We're not competing at all, and yet we are, because there are so many, so many advertising networks out there. There are so many SDKs that can enhance like the experience of the game and or the sound or the feeling of the game. And then there's like providers such as us that would be like, no, you need to focus on business intelligence. And I think I've spoken to 2,000-3,000 publishers, different publishers through the last couple of years, and I still haven't met one that has a lot of time. Like not a single person or company that has a lot of time, like a super busy people. And we found that we have what we believe obviously is an amazing platform technology that can absolutely help app publishers, but it's not just going to help them themselves. So we need to invest, and I think this is on any service provider in this space, we need to invest a lot of time in actually making sure that we bring the developer on board. So for us particularly, it's like there's obviously a conversation around like how we treat the data, how we protect the data, but then the next step is really to actually make sure that the developer actually uses the platform, and that knowledge is on us. And you can do a lot with pop-ups in the interface, et cetera, but you need to jump on a conversation, you need to make webinars, you need to sort of evangelize and really sort of like truly help the developer understand your technology and how they can leverage it, and that is a fight for attention. And at the end of the day, it's the developer that decides whether or not it's worth it. I mean, you obviously also, I think one thing is like really key is like in a lot of developers would integrate an SDK, but don't really dedicate the resources internally, the time, the right person to speak to the service provider and make sure that they understand how to utilize this in the best possible way. And that is then on the developers to actually make sure of that.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for sharing that perspective. You know, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of AR and virtual reality, but if we're going to talk about SDKs and progressive technology, it's hard not to just bring that up as something that's new. Keith, Rovio, or David, I'd love to hear from you specifically about, you know, are you guys pursuing VR and AR as a platform that you think is going to be exciting for you, or, you know, what's your evaluation right now on those emerging technologies?
I mean, I can speak a little bit about VR, and that I had one of my prior publishers I worked with. We did a VR game for the Oculus, actually for Samsung's hardware, and it's exciting. Look, it's really, really cool, sexy technology. Everyone wants to play with it and get on board, and yet I don't think it's there, you know, as we're all determined. But we continue to look at it, even at Rovio, to try to figure out if there's a gaming experience that we can pull out of that technology and use. But it's challenging, you know. It's still really, really hard to develop a game for VR and make it enjoyable, because I think there's some inherent limitations in how the devices are used and how people feel after using them. You know, it's real easy to get motion sick. So flinging yourself as a bird across a giant chasm is probably not the way to do it. But there's something to be said for wearing a headset and feeling very immersed into an experience. And I think that's where sound and other SDKs can actually add to that without making you feel a little bit ill. You know, it's not to say VR is not going to happen. It's really, really cool, but it's something to look at and tread carefully. Yeah. You know? So I don't know if you play with it too, or.
Yeah, I totally agree. I couldn't agree more, actually. That's, you know, it's really a cool technology. I mean, both of them are. I mean, I've always been intrigued by virtual reality for a long time. Mm-hmm. That being said, we're not working on bringing PBA Bowling Challenge to VR at this point. Mm-hmm. You know, we really need to see, you know, a business case where we probably won't be first to the show. I know we won't. We'll probably hopefully be their second when the ROI shows up. Mm-hmm. You know, that being said, I mean, it's fun to watch. I mean, it's interesting.
I actually think AR is the one to look at. It gets a lot less press, but AR is a lot less technology requirements. You know, you can do something with some LCD glasses that are very cheap, and you can project something inside of a room that makes you feel like you're in a different space, but you don't need to wear a very heavy headset or things like that. And some of the tech I've seen is really, really cool, and it's not very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, this is an area. Ravi, sorry, you want to jump in?
So from the Samsung perspective, we are definitely behind the VR, and we are working closely with Oculus on that. We also have our store within a store within Oculus, and we are not looking for like content, but we are looking for quality content. So if you are interested in learning more, maybe we can discuss a little bit more about this panel discussion to see how we can get you started and get you on board the Samsung VR App Store.
So just to stay with VR for a minute, this is one area where I've always felt that data analytics and, you know, and BI has just been totally underrepresented. And so my question for you two is, do you have any data on how VR shows up to players, and are people using analytics to optimize the experience to create more engaging, more fun games that work specifically for that platform? Or are we just not there yet and it's still too early?
We have not done one VR game ever, and I think that's because you know, the developers and publishers aren't at the point where they're refining the experience. They're trying to get the basic experience nailed. And this we've been through this before, right? When free-to-play first came along, analytics was essentially dashboards to monitor the health of your game, whether you were making money or your retention rates were good. And most of the focus was actually on figuring out what are the mechanics that need to work together in conjunction to give you a good free-to-play experience. And the industry took 2-3 years, I guess. Maybe some are still learning and refining. But now that we've got that understanding of the basic experience and what works and what doesn't work, then you can start to refine it with analytics, BI, and what my perception in this is that UI will continue to be a problem, but let's worry about the problems that we can solve, and the problems that we can solve are all around engagement. And the SDKs that we're talking about, haptics and AR, VR, even BI tools and analytic guys like Anders and me, it's all about improving engagement, because once you've got engagement, then you've got a sustainable business model. And I think that's the focus in the industry right now. Yeah,
and I can't help but wonder if the current tools are the right tools for gathering the data around this new platform. Can a tool like deltaDNA's analytics SDK actually integrate into that experience, or is it so new that now you're looking at a whole different set of data metrics that you need to account for? Maybe it is sort of fatigue or sort of more emotional qualities about how the game makes you feel, rather than the standard kind of more, I don't know, mechanical, technical aspects of what.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if we could tell if somebody's fallen over. Maybe there's an interruption to the data collection or something like that. But certainly we can figure out things like momentum. We can, for example, very easily collect events around mission start and mission fail, or mission start and mission succeed. So we can understand, how players are moving through the game. What is their cadence? What is their momentum? And that certainly gives us a great input in terms of how to balance the game design. But also, if you start to overlay that with different segments of players, so looking at expert players versus novice players, then you can see totally different onboarding funnels, and you can start to refine your picture of the different types of players that come through the game. And that is fascinating, because that is where you really unlock engagement levels through that sort of level of personalization. And VR will be the same. It will come. It's just that there's more basic stuff to be done first.
Right.
I think that's a super good point, the last one. And the publishers we speak to, like they're interested in VR, but like actually building a really good game is first and foremost building a really good game. Then figuring out like how to distribute it or what features it should have is obviously interesting. But like, I mean, from a personal perspective, I look forward to retirement, because I think there's going to be like an amazing world of games and virtual reality. It doesn't really matter if you can walk anymore. We can take and put on a helmet and just like walk around between like Playboy models and shoot stuff. But that's from a personal perspective. In terms of like in terms of quantifying, that's not what we do. In terms of quantifying the business potential, yet if the game or the app is distributed through an app store, we can quantify it. We can say this is the revenue, this is a download that is going to this portion of the market, but it's insignificant at this point. And I do think that I honestly do think a lot of technology becomes like these features. If you think about it, like 3D, when that came out, like 15 years ago, and I still hate going to the cinema and put on like these ridiculous plastic glasses and having like an avatar that is like almost stepping out, but it's not really stepping out. It's just like there. I think I think it's going to take a while. AR maybe not. VR absolutely.
Great. Okay. Well, I want to leave some time for questions, so I've got two more kind of quick questions I'd like to hear from everyone on. So when you make a game, you can make a game in Unity or Unreal or whatever. You can crank it out of the box and publish it on Google Play, virtually immediately. And that's kind of just the out-of-the-box experience. If you were going to make a recommendation for a single sort of enhancement, a single SDK, or a single kind of component to add on to your game, just one, and I don't mean a specific brand, I mean a type of tool that you think would really be the most important go-to-market kind of tool, I'd just love to hear what that is, because we sort of feel like we need them all, because a lot of them provide core functional value that you really need. But apart from the Google Play payment SDK, which you need to put in to get it up, then what? Where do you start?
I would say there's probably two important things to have. One is have a good analytics package. Know what your gamers are doing at all times. If it's something like deltaDNA or Priori or something, but know what your gamers are doing and how much time they're spending. And then I think the second thing that's often overlooked is, and I would advocate for this, would be ad monetization. I would have something in there because that you've all seen the same data I have, which is roughly 95% of your players, if you're doing a free-to-play game, will probably not purchase something. But if you have something in at launch and you take advantage of that audience, you're able to get some revenue out of it. I mean, we have an internal SDK at Rovio that we use. It's one SDK that powers over 60 of the Rovio games right now, and those are the real key components to it. We know what our gamers are doing, and we know how long they spend in the game, and we look at all the different KPI. And then secondly, we plug into over 100 different ad networks, and we're able to fill and target and segment against our audience and know and earn some revenue off it. And it's really helped us raise the ARPDAU of our games over 250% in the last year. So I would just say those two things are key. Everything else that's in the game, but know your audience and then have some other options for revenue generation.
Great, thank you.
So
perfect.
I guess I'm kind of biased, but I really feel like you got to know your players, and by whatever route you can do that. From traditional focus testing, which is a deep experience but a small number of people, through to beta testing with a couple of thousand players, through to launch and then active player management. If you know your players, you'll start to create more successful games. Analytics is not a replacement to the great creative idea and the effective development of the game, but we can get you a little bit further up the top of the hill.
Right.
And I think the industry has moved on really well, really impressively actually, to get good ideas delivered in a free-to-play environment. And I think the next iteration of that is actually refining the player management to make sure that they're wonderful experiences, not just good experiences.
I mean, it makes me ask if a game like Crossy Roads was developed through the lens of analytics, or whether they threw that out and just said, we're just going to do a Frogger game and make it cool, and it worked. And so in that case, you didn't even need, I mean, obviously you could benefit from enhancements and tuning the experience, but it's a cart before the horse, chicken and egg kind of quandary.
No, it's don't get me wrong, it's still a hits-driven industry, right? It's still a huge, the creative element is first and foremost and always will be. So those ideas will always come along, but they're the one-off hits.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking about sustainability in an industry that most of the vast majority of games lose money.
Yeah, good point.
So I think that we welcome those games coming through. But actually, let's get across our platform, for example, we see that 60 to 70% of players don't return for a second session. As an industry, that's too low, and we need to get that dramatically up. So knowing the players is the best way I can think of doing that.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Ravi.
So yeah, I think one thing I fully agree with you. Knowing your players is key to success. Second is, if you're targeting a specific OEM, in this case, if you are working with Samsung, I would like you guys to consider changing your payment method to Samsung in-app purchases, and that way Samsung would be able to help you merchandise more of your game, which may help you in getting more download numbers, more discoverability. So that is one more key aspect that you should think when you're submitting or building your game for Android. Think about designing or changing the payment methods for different OEMs. Other than that, I think you also need to understand who your audience is, how your game is doing, where is the retention. How many times does if I downloaded your game, is it just sitting there, or am I doing something with the game? So those are some of the other key points which I would like to add.
Great, thanks, Keith.
I wish I had a different answer. Understanding your users is an absolute must. It has to be the most important thing. I think we have a great example when at Concrete Software, our first free-to-play game, we tried to bolt on free-to-play onto our solitaire game. Had great idea, we thought, about how users were going to act and how they were going to go out and start unlocking the different types of solitaire games, and that we had this virtual currency, and they were going to, grind to get this currency and unlock all these games, and they did exact opposite. They hoarded all the money. They all wanted to see how much money they could gain in the game. They all played one game, and it's so important to understand what those users are doing, because, what are you going to do to improve the game? How are you going to improve the user experience? If they're not playing multiplayer, well, then, either get them to do what you want or make whatever they're doing better. And I'd say the first time user experience is the most important. Understanding when you come in the game, are you losing players right away? Jelly Flop was another great game where we had to refine that game so many times because we thought it was so obvious that you drew a little line and you drop a little jelly and he would flop around, and people were drawing lines from Jelly Flop down to the water, and the jelly would just drop down to the water every time, and it was just understanding, that it wasn't as obvious since we built the game and what those users are doing.
Okay, well, it sounds like we have consensus here, Anders, unless you have a different take on this.
No, I have a completely different answer because I don't know anything about building games. I was thinking I probably refrain from trying to pay advice there. But I think there's something that a lot of developers are ignoring, which is the value of your own data and the ownership of your own data as well. And I would really encourage, if you take the time, it's not the most fun exercise in the world, but really understand what the SDKs that you integrate actually do. What information do they obtain, and how is that information being obtained? Being used and resold, because we see that quite a lot, and I quite frankly think that's like it's a horrendous thing. It is due to the chaos of this industry, which makes it fun. It's chaotic, it's fast moving. You integrate shit like right and left, but then you're actually being taken advantage of. Both Apple and Google are trying to address this. I'm sure Samsung is doing the same, but you also need to take ownership of that as a developer and really try to understand, and particularly from the ad networks, what is it that my information can be used for, and is that actually fair? Does that actually add value to my business, or is there something that I need to address? Sorry, that's super boring, but I just want to say it.
Okay, cool. And then just real quick, if we could just kind of go down the line, what's missing? What do you need that does not exist today? I mean, I think people are out there trying to solve the problems, patch holes, outsmart the current solutions, or kind of, maybe create more of a niche solution for something that just isn't available. Keith, I don't know if you want to start, but
yeah, absolutely.
What do you want that isn't available?
I think addressing the first question about SDK fatigue, I would love to see everything working well together in one SDK, have my analytics come in, have my ad networks, have the revenue come in, be able to segment, address each individual's, the way they want, have ads go to the right people, have in-app purchase ads go to the right people. I know we're getting closer. There's always something missing here and there. We're not quite there, and once we get there, I think it'll be really exciting because I think it'll be a much better experience for users. And I think we'll also have a much better ARPDAU, LTVs, and everything else, and we can do a lot more with our games.
I think that that level of sophistication of using the data, it is coming. I think resources are tight, and using some more sort of bespoke segmentation, predictive modeling, to characterize players into user groups. We've done some work in looking at ad responsive players versus IAP responsive players, and that's a fundamental in terms of how you manage the player relationship. We know that certain types of players are ad responsive, so you can keep the impressions up without damaging your retention, and that kind of starts to unlock this three-way dilemma we have between ads and in-app purchase and retention. And I think that some of the tools now, and some of the work that we've been doing, looking around predictive stuff, that will evolve and give people the sort of the basic tool sets to be guided on how to use the data. rather than being given a sandbox with lots of functionality and a blank sheet of paper and not really knowing where to start. And that sort of level of guidance across the industry, I think, is an interesting next step.
Totally want to echo that. Like, I think actually a lot of it has to do with service providers, whether you provide your service through an SDK or in any form, really need to step up the game. I mean, there's a consumerization trend going on, and individuals are used to having highly personalized services, and yet when you integrate an SDK or you subscribe to any other kind of services, typically like a one-box-fits-all solution. And I think we really need to work hard on making our services more personalized, provide better support. It's not just going somewhere, downloading a piece of code and then installing it. It's a customer journey, and I think we have a lot to do, all of us probably, in terms of making sure that the users get not only what they need, but also understand the value they can get from it.
It's kind of ironic because every day we talk to developers and publishers about how they can engage with their players, and then we thought, oh, wait a minute, let's improve the way that we engage with our client base, and so learn a load of lessons there.
Guilty.
Totally guilty.
Well, that set off a whole lot of questions to our clients, and changing around the UI and making it so it's. Yeah. In Scotland, we have a saying called "cobbler's bairns." The guy that makes the shoes, his children generally are shoeless because he spends all his time making shoes for other people. So learning our own lessons there, and I think that the third-party suppliers here can make it easier for the developers.
And David, how about from you? If there was one thing you could have that you don't have today, what would that be?
I would have to say that one thing that's come up recently is with all these SDKs we put in, there needs to be a certain level of control. And by that I mean when you put in a piece of complex technology in a mobile game, you need to understand when and how that's talking to servers. And what's commonly happened with some games we run where you've got complex live events happening, you want to know when that's affecting the bandwidth of the game because that affects the user experience. And oftentimes the companies that we work with that come up with these SDKs, we go talk to them and say, look, we want to understand how and when this works. And they say, no, that's proprietary. And we're like, well, then we're just not going to use it. Because for us, if we're running a live event, which means there's something going on with PvP or you're talking to servers, I don't want to ad caching going on in the background, or I don't want some sort of data collection happening. I want it to be first and foremost the game. And a lot of companies are just like, they won't let you at least flag that or acknowledge when it's happening. So for me, it's more control, a little bit more control about how those SDKs work within, and that's an important piece. So
cool. Great. Well, I don't know if we have much more time. If anyone has a question, we probably can field one or two. Otherwise, I'd probably wrap it up. No. Okay. Well, I just want to thank all of you for joining us, and thank you, Casual Connect. And
thank you, guys.
Thank you.